Okay, so the rest of tonight, I'm going through the task list and the areas, and I'm just talking about kind of one-off definitions that didn't fall into the big overall view, the overall concepts that we talked about during the first part. I threw an extinction in here again to make sure you know what extinction is. Extinction is the reinforcement of the removal of reinforcement for a target behavior. It's ignoring behavior for the most part. Conditioned reinforcer versus unconditioned reinforcer. A conditioned reinforcer is a reinforcer you learn to like, and an unconditioned reinforcer is one that you're born liking. So conditioned and unconditioned is learned and unlearned. Learned is a better word than conditioned. An unconditioned reinforcer is things like food, avoiding pain, certain medications and drugs. If you and a German Shepherd, this is what Ivar always says, if you and a German Shepherd dog like it, then it's an unconditioned reinforcer. I don't know why he chose German Shepherd dog. And if you had to learn to like something, and the biggest example of a conditioned reinforcer is money. Dogs don't like money. People like money. You have to learn the value of money. You have to learn through experience that money is valuable. You have to have had some experience to learn the reinforcer is valuable, or for it to have value to you, then it's a conditioned or learned reinforcer. So conditioned versus unconditioned reinforcer. A stimulus. There's stimulus, discriminative stimulus, and stimulus control. So a stimulus by itself, just a plain stimulus, is just an event in the environment that impacts your nerves in some way, but it doesn't mean anything. So if I go, bah! That's a stimulus, but it doesn't have any communicative value. It doesn't mean anything to it. It's just like, that was weird. Whereas if I say, fire, there's a fire, everybody out of the building, that is a discriminative stimulus. That has a meaning. It prompts, it evokes a certain behavior in you guys. So stimulus by itself, it's just something that you can sense. Discriminative stimulus, there's a learning history. It means something to you. It evokes a behavior. Stimulus control is what a discriminative stimulus has. So it makes you do something. So a plain stimulus does not have stimulus control. It doesn't control any behavior. A discriminative stimulus does have stimulus control. It discriminates a certain behavior you should do. So you come up with those terms. The three-term contingency is SDRSR. That's just Skinner's name for his operant model, SDRSR. So there's a dependent relationship between the stimuli right before the behavior and the stimuli right after. Okay. So just to clarify, I'm going through. So I said, know the definitions from the DSM. All of Section A is the DSM. It's just exactly the DSM. But on the annotated thing, it's a short version of just what you need to know. Section B is principles of ABA. We covered a lot of it earlier. All the stuff we did earlier was principles of ABA. But this is stuff that didn't get covered. Treatment and skill acquisition. The next section is treatment. Discrimination training. Discrimination training is what we do all the time. Discrimination training is teaching a child to do a certain behavior in response to a certain SD. So the child can clap when you say clap versus wave when you say wave. They've made a discrimination. That's discrimination training. So certain behaviors go with certain SDs. Discrete trial training. That's what we do all the time. It's using SDR and SR as the model for building new behaviors. Natural environment training. This is the one we don't do very often. And this is actually what we're talking about a little bit. The big idea behind natural environment training is that rather than doing discrete trial teaching, rather than getting a kid in a chair and making him do something, you just let them kind of wander around and pick an activity, and then you use whatever they choose to do as the stimuli and the opportunity to teach. So if a child starts climbing on some playground equipment, then you say, well, great, I'm going to teach prepositions. Look, you're on top. Now let's go under. And you use the thing the child naturally chose as the material, as the activity, and as the reinforcer for what you're trying to teach. And there's a little video of an actual, pull it up here, a little video of it. Well, hold on, let's watch the video. Actually, I don't have it queued up, so we won't look at it yet. But the idea is if you're using naturally occurring stimuli, the behavior will generalize better. So if you're doing a chair doing prepositions with a truck, child's not going to go out and start using spontaneously, whereas if we're using a dollhouse or jungle gym, they might actually use it spontaneously. And also, the value is that it's inherently reinforcing, or it reinforces itself. The child could use prepositions in a natural setting because they're reinforced by the pleasure of doing the activity that they were doing when they learned the behavior. So the downside, that is natural environment training. We don't do it very much because our goal is to help kids catch up a couple of years of growth in 1 year, or 4 years of growth in 2 years. And you can't let the child choose the activity and choose the pace and choose the materials and do all the things we want to teach a child. However, we have used the naturalistic approach when we have kids who are very difficult to motivate. We have kids who have very severe kind of negative responses or aggressive responses to therapy. When we have parents who are really excited about natural environment training. So we do use it, and it's also not a bad way to generalize skills to the real world. So once a child's got a skill and you want them to use it, it's like, oh yeah, take them out to the playground and do prepositions on the jungle gym. That's actually a good idea. And the child's like, yay, I'm outside. And work on it. So it's not, in none of the research on intensive intervention and major, big long-term outcomes has used the natural environment training model. They've all used the really intensive big push model that we do, but just know about the basic components of it. Fluency-based training. Oh, this is going to be deadly, guys. So I realize this is really hard to just go through definition after definition after definition. But some of these are very new. Fluency-based training is the idea that, well, normally when we do therapy, when we set a goal for a child, it's that they will do a certain behavior accurately a certain percentage of time, right? So if the goal is tying shoes, say like Bobby Lee will tie his shoes independently 90% of the time, and that's our goal. To be able to use a complete sentence, use 3 complete sentences to describe a picture in 80% of opportunities. Fluency adds a time component to the goal. So instead of just saying to be able to tie his shoes in 90% of opportunities, we say to be able to tie his shoes within 5 seconds in 90% of opportunities. So it's accuracy plus time is fluency. And that makes sense. I mean, we have a lot of kids who can say a sentence, but one of the things that they point out is a child is more likely to generalize a skill that's fluent. They're more likely to maintain a skill that's fluent. And they're more likely to say fantastic they have a fluent skill. So if it takes a child 25 seconds to use 3 sentences to describe a picture, they're probably not going to be very conversational. They're probably not going to go out and just start spitting out sentences left and right. Whereas if they go, the duck's writing it, whereas if they talk really fast, they're more likely to. So, how do you teach fluency? You overteach is the term used for it. So you teach, you don't just get it mastered, you don't just get some child can do it, you get something to do it fast. So you set the criteria higher and teach to a certain speed. So just know what it is. The PREMAC principle. Okay. The PREMAC principle, kind of like 2 big components of the PREMAC principle. Number 1 is that behaviors can be reinforced. It's about reinforcement. Behaviors can be reinforcers. So back in the 50s and 60s, they just thought like things were reinforcers, like food and drinks and objects were reinforcers. Then PREMAC said, well, no, we can call behaviors reinforcers too. So like getting to ride a bike can be a reinforcer, or playing a video game can be a reinforcer. So behaviors can be reinforcers. And then the other part of the PREMAC principle is any behavior you choose spontaneously to do more than another behavior is more reinforcing than that behavior. So if you watch a child in a room for an hour do whatever they want, and the child plays bingo, terrible example, for 40 minutes, and then and then reads a book for 20 minutes, then we know that playing bingo can be used as a reinforcer for reading a book. Mm-hmm. The thing you spend more time doing voluntarily is a reinforcer for something that you spend less time doing. So it's a way to pick out reinforcers for kids. And by the way, like just watching a child and see what they do is called free operant preference assessment. So you're not good with that. I'll come back to that. That was a bad extra word to throw in there. Okay, so know what the pre-mac principle is. Behaviors are can be reinforcers. Anything you do more than something else is a reinforcer of the other thing. Things you do more are they're reinforcers than things you do less. Oh, I'm gonna let you. Let's see. Let me just do the things that I think are the hardest to understand and that are the least intuitive from just reading definitions of. Preference assessment. If you look at the online version of this, the online version, there's little video samples of free offered preference assessment and forced choice with your type and so on. So just look at it online and look at the little videos, look at the definitions. Errorless learning. There's a little video sample of that on the website as well. Errorless learning, basically the idea is you prompt at such a high level when you're teaching a new skill that the child never makes a mistake. So use a huge reinforcer. I mean, a huge prompt so that so here's the website. So here's the videos to test the verbal operants. Here are examples of time sampling. So partial interval time sampling, whole interval, and momentary time sampling. Has anybody done momentary time? I bet nobody's done momentary time sampling. Have you?
No, I don't think so.
What would be a common example?
So momentary time sampling is. Let me just play this and see. Oh, hold on.
Okay, now we're going to do momentary time sampling. It's a little bit different. Instead of having this little earpiece saying observe and record in my ear, it's just going to make some beeps. And when I hear the beep, I'm going to look at the emoji. I'm going to see if he's crying or not for just that moment. Just the moment that I hear the beep and I look, I will say, is he crying or not? And if he is, then I'll go over and I'll mark a yes. If he isn't, then I'll go over and mark a no. It's called momentary time sampling because all we're taking data on is the behavior at the moment of the observation. So let's try it. Looking away. No, not crying. Yes. No.
Seems fun.
Yes. Yes. Remember, all you care about.
Okay. Does that make sense? You like to tell it?
Is it like looking for that one specific behavior that child would be doing?
That one behavior at that one
specific moment.
At that moment.
Okay.
Exactly.
So you're looking for a crying behavior at that specific moment that you're hearing
doing
play.
it right.
Exactly.
Rather than like when we're doing peer data, we're looking for verbal, nonverbal, all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you could do multiple momentaries, but you usually don't. You just usually pick one behavior because it's just hard to do.
Yeah.
So.
It's kind of like on and off task data. That's what we typically do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you use it to measure. So you use partial interval and whole interval for stuff that's hard to count. Like you can't count social interaction. It's like how do you well yeah they were doing it, but they were talking and they were basically just did it occur or did it not, and then we use partial or whole interval time sampling. We also use partial interval. We also never use whole interval. So things that are they're not discrete. We use time sampling for. And for momentary, it's more for things that kids are supposed to do for a long period of time, but we don't want to have to watch them the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So if the job is a child staying in a seat or not? You can have a little beep every 5 minutes and look, is he in a seat? Or is he in circle? Or is he doing his homework? Or is he sitting? Or is he engaged in sports at the playground or whatever? It's a way that you can do something else and still take the data at the same time, because it just takes like a second every minute or every 5 minutes to take the data. A teacher can take the data as well. So things are supposed to be continuously use momentary time sampling. Oh, okay. So here's errorless. Not that way. So there's actually two things. One is positional prompting, which we all use, we all know how to do, and this is errorless learning.
Duck. Nice. Cool.
So we're just using so big a prompt that the child can't possibly make a mistake. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like
Yeah.
the child has no idea what's going on. They're just like, they're not. It takes many trials. Oh, you'll see. It takes many trials to like use this to actually teach something.
Duck. Spoon. Good. Duck. Very good.
It's closer and closer.
Spoon. Nice duck. Spoon. Very nice. Good job. Duck. Amazing. Great job. Duck. Amazing. Very nice. Duck. Good. Spoon.
Okay, so that's errorless. It's also, this is actually errorless discrimination training, because we're actually teaching them discrimination while we're doing the errorless process. Okay, and it does work. I mean, the child doesn't really have to, like, when they're this far apart, the kid's not really paying attention, but theoretically, according to the opera model, over thousands of trials of getting reinforced for doing this specific thing in response to the specific sound, learning can be occurring, and then the child can be getting it. And this is how they teach pigeons to play tic-tac-toe and do complicated things where like they don't really care at all. The pigeons don't care, but they wanted to do something specific and make discriminations, even though it's all just abstract nonsense.
And you could do that for any program, correct? I mean,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, and you can use full physical prompts as the errorless method. You know, anything that just the prompt basically just completely you just prevent any way you prevent an incorrect response.
Yeah.
And we typically would use this for a child who's having a very difficult time getting going in treatment. Young kids who are having a hard time making their first discriminations, kids who have very severe behaviors in response to demands, we mean like really up the reinforcement, really up the prompts, so not let them blow it.
So this is a type of training that or learning that would be fated to be regular discrete.
Well, it was fated by the end.
Yeah. So, but like
This is-
I mean,
this
like
is-
throughout, like so you're not going to teach every single word in errorless. Like if you had like a target list of like 20
Yeah.
to go through and you want to teach them, you're not going to teach each and every single one in errorless, technically?
Probably not, but you might do it to get a first discrimination down. So this is for
Okay.
kids who, like, you've been doing a program for 4 months and they just can't get any expressive object labels. Or they can't get any receptive object labels. They're just not getting it. So we'll switch to let's teach our first discrimination using errorless and
Okay.
using additional prompts. Okay, now here's another, well, we got the video up here. There's something called time delay prompts. This is something I've never ever done. I didn't know what it was, and I was always kind of like tapping in there. Anyway, what is that? That sounds silly. And it is kind of weird. In a time delay prompt, you basically extend the duration between the SD and the prompt until the child's responding before you prompt. So you start out with an immediate prompt, and then a 1 second prompt, and a 2 second prompt, and a 3 second prompt. And then eventually the child just goes like, spits it out before you give the prompt. So here you go. So that's what it looks like.
What is it? Cup. Cup. Good job. 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 What is it? Cup. Good job.
So there's a little note after. So this is also for, this is a way to work with kids who are having a hard time getting a concept. They take many trials to do this. Danielle's laughing because her aunt is, that's, back of the camera is her aunt. And like the obvious, like when I hear this described, I'm like, well, dang, it sure seems like it would do what? Like what bad impact would it have?
They're just gonna wait.
It kind of
Wait it
teaches
out.
kids. It teaches kids to respond slowly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah.
Like wait us out.
Yeah. So I mean, it does work. There's lots of research that shows that it works. I don't know that it generates a really rapid response though. But it's on the task list. And it's a weird one, so we made a little video of it. It's unintuitive to me. Okay. Most to least prompting and least to most prompting. I need some hyphen in least to most. Most to least prompting is what we do all the time. We give a great big prompt and get the correct response and then fade the prompt out. Most to least is what we do. Least to most is where you give a little prompt and see if you get the response, and if you don't, then on the next try you give a little bit bigger prompt and see if you get the response. And so at least it's what it sounds like. And you don't use least to most while teaching new skills. You use least to most when you're generalizing to a new environment. So the example I have in the task list is if you're teaching a child to play a board game, you do most to you do a normal prompting, but then when you're generalizing it to school, say you're taking a child to school and you want them to play Chutes and Ladders with other kids there, you might give the least prompt you think might get the response. So like, go play. But then if that doesn't work, then you might kind of nudge them over. And if that doesn't work, you might sit down and start prompting. Yeah. So basically, if a child has a skill and you want to generalize or apply somewhere, be the least weird therapist you can be, right? Be the least intrusive therapist you can be, and prompt as little as possible, and then up it a little bit, and then up a little bit, and up a little bit. So that would be least to most. But not during new programs and new skills, because then the kid's just going to learn to okay, I'll wait until you give me a great big prompt and ignore most of your SDs. Okay. Time delay. No. Okay, chaining. What's it called when you break down a behavior into multiple steps in order to teach it using chains?
Task assessment?
Task analysis. Very good. Task analysis is not on the list. It's not on the chart. It's not on the task list, but you should know it.
I know that. We do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume everybody kind of knows forward chaining and backward chaining, but be familiar with it. There's a type of chaining a term I never heard of before, is total task chaining, where instead of going forward or going backwards, every time you work with a child, you teach them to do the whole chain. So you prompt 1, 2, 3, 4, done, you're good. Instead of doing 1, then 1, 2, then 1, 2, 3, then 1, 2, 3, 4, or doing 4, then 3, 4, then 2, 3, 4, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, good, 1, 2, 3, 4, good, and you teach the whole chain at each sitting, at each trial. And that's for higher functioning kids and for simpler, shorter chains, basically. But total task chaining, that's something I never heard of, and I'm sure I got that wrong on the test.
Total test chain.
Shaping. You guys know the definition of shaping? It's something we do all the time, but people don't have a great definition, great understanding of it. I'm going to show you on the video. Hold on. Crap, I think I have to go to the website. This is my favorite part tonight, guys. This is the best part. It's all worth it for this. Go to the annotated task list. The PDF is there. The links are all good. Shaping.
Hey, so you need a website. Let me show you how I made
Oh,
mine
wow.
with Wix. First, I went to wix.com.
Okay, we're gonna shape this rat. Oh, wrong one. Hold on. Go back to that one. Okay.
Just getting stuffy here. Sorry.
The clicker here doesn't matter. The rat was taught to be reinforced by a clicker, so the clicker means he's going to get a little chunk of food. So, but the clicker is the reinforcer, and we're going to teach the rat to go through the tunnel. In shaping, nose shaping. This is another one. I should put this on the no list. Shaping is, the definition sounds terrible, but it's the reinforcement of successively accurate approximations of the target behavior. Shaping is reinforcement of successively accurate approximations of the target behavior. That means you reinforce a certain level of accuracy, and then they have to be a little bit more accurate, and a little bit more accurate, and a little bit more accurate, and you gradually move the behavior into what you want. So they're going to shape this rat to walk through the tunnel, and they're going to say, okay, the criteria first of all is to like move towards the box, and then that gets reinforced. And then you have to touch the box, and that gets reinforced. And you have to like stick your head in the box, and that gets reinforced. And watch the rat. I love this video.
Right.
Oh, my mouth's so bad. That's so nice. I did it.
Okay, so that's reinforcing successively accurate approximations of the target behavior. We do this in verbal M all the time. Yeah.
Would descents be an example of this? Like
Pardon?
Would descents programs be an example of this?
Yeah, kind of the opposite, sort of, but kind of. We're during desensitization. You're sort of killing a learned behavior rather than shaping a learned behavior. You're sort of extinguishing a learned behavior in a way.
Okay.
So, but you're doing it in a little. Yeah, I mean you're. I see what you're saying. It's sort of like the negative. It's like the negative version of shaping. All right, so. Then, all right, watch this.
Open the world of music. It's all here. Get the app.
Okay, going through a tunnel, fine. Let's teach a rat to put an object in a bucket. So what's she reinforcing now?
Him
Touching
touches
touching
Touching
whatever
it.
it is.
What now?
Pick up.
Pick up. What's she reinforcing now?
The right direction.
Closer to the basket. Okay,
I
so
want to do it.
Imagine my night.
if you keep watching the video, she teaches it to go left and go right, and then she gradually starts raising the basket higher and higher. And then, if you're in grad school, this is what you do. If you're an animal person in grad school,
Oh my god.
come on, Gray Rat, what are you doing?
That is so neat.
Do they like tackle each other for it?
But anyway, so like then there's teams. I mean, there's a whole tournament there, shaping your animal. Okay, so shaping is great because you can. The person doesn't have to understand what's going on at all. They don't have to have any comprehension of what the target is. They don't have to be really trying. They just have to be like just. It's you can shape up very, very complex behaviors in little teeny tiny bits, and the rat is very happy, or the child is very happy because they're getting lots of reinforcement, even though they're barely doing the target behavior. We gradually shape up. So that's how we shape up words, shape up sounds into words, into sentences, and so on. So know what shaping is, and when you get a shaping question or you're wondering, like think of the rats. And it's just like. Just a little bit higher criteria for a correct response. A little bit higher. So, and I shouldn't be too critical because, like, I got the first dog I got after being in grad school was like I taught him so many great tricks. I mean, like my first dog could clean up all his toys in the house. We taught him to go say, Weber, pick up your toys, and he'd go pick up 15 toys and put them all in his basket to get one treat.
Wow.
I'll pay
And it's
you.
like,
That's
so.
great.
They're
And
all
then
in my house right now.
but then like we had kids and
Yeah, then-
my dog my dog barely knows me. Don't spend any time with her.
Aww.
Okay. Okay. So no shaping. Pacing. This is actually another kind of interesting thing. Pacing. I never heard of this. Pacing is the idea that the smaller the intertrial interval, the more engaged and the more responsive the child will be. So if you do touch your nose, good. Touch your nose, good. As opposed to touch your nose, good. Touch your nose, good. The faster you go, the more responsive the child will be. And that applies to us doing discrete trial teaching, and that applies to a teacher in class working with kids. So the more interactive a teacher is with anybody, the more learning opportunities they get, the more responsive and attentive and more accurate kids tend to be in responding. And that's kind of like counter to what special ed teachers are sometimes taught. They're taught like go slow and let things sink in. It's like, well, we know, that's a disaster. You're going to slow yourself down if you do that. Okay, read about visual supports. That's like teach schedules. Every special ed class like has a visual schedule for now. Snack and then cookies. And we do teach type scheduling. So read about that. Curriculum modification. I call this a reductive procedure, but curriculum modification just basically says if a child's having trouble in class doing what they're supposed to do, then you change the curriculum. You make it easier, you break it down, you have them do something different than everybody else is doing. You give them a longer period of time to do it, you give them more help. You do something, if a child's tantruming and having trouble in class because of the demand of the class, you change the curriculum a little bit, you adjust it. That's just the name for that. Alternative and augmentative communication. So that's any kind of communication device that's using a talker, that's using PEX icons. It's just be able to recognize, okay, that's an alternative and augmentative communication thing. Functional approaches to communication. Functional approaches to communication is different than functional communication training, sadly. Functional approach, this is where you're just going to have to read it. No, functional approaches to communication just means you should work on, no, I'm not presenting anymore. You should work on, there's certain skills that every child should know. Every child, no matter what their function level is, they should learn to be able to say, I'm hurt, I'm hungry, I have to go to the bathroom, I'm scared. That's a fuzzier one. But so even if a child has a terrible time learning expressive language, there are certain functional skills that we should teach them. So there's certain functional things that we should teach with everybody, and that's called a functional approach to communication. That's
Safety things.
safety things. Yes, like what to do when they're lost, exactly. So that's sort of like the bare minimum you want a child to have when they leave the program, even if they were not very responsive to treatment at all. They're skills that no matter what, they're going to be useful for the rest of their lives. Prepositions, maybe the child will never learn to talk, and prepositions are going to be meaningless, but if they can say, I have to go to the bathroom, that's really functional. That's a really good thing to teach. So functional approach to communication.
I had a question. If a child is wearing, like they're nonverbal and they're wearing an ID bracelet, and you would just teach them like to show somebody their ID bracelet? Okay.
Yep, exactly. We already said this earlier, so teaching play skills, teaching joint attention, teaching motor skills. I'm sorry. You don't have to know specific techniques for teaching these things, just know what they are and recognize when they're being taught. You all know what motor skills are, play skills are, safety and adaptive skills. Let's see what we have to get to. Joint attention. That's a concept you need to know. You need to know what joint attention is. So let me demonstrate joint attention a little bit. Okay, good. Okay, she doesn't know what I wanted, but she knows I wanted something. Okay,
Yeah, right.
I don't know what I wanted either. I usually try and do it when there's a piece of food or something on the table, and the person will give me a piece of food. She didn't know what I wanted. But I looked at her, and she knew, he wants my attention. And then she knew I wanted her to look at the backpack, and then she knew I wanted something related to the backpack, so she did the rat thing. It's like, I'll kick the backpack. That's all joint attention. So we're both attending to the same thing. She's attending to me, and I'm attending to her. We're both attending to the backpack. That is nonverbal communication where we're jointly attending to the same materials. And like one of the best example, it really struck me when my son first played soccer, and he went to his first soccer practice, and the coach said, "Everybody pick a partner." And so you're my son, and I'm the person standing next to him, and like the two kids looked at each other, and then like the other kid went. My son went, and they went off, and they were partners to kick the ball back and forth. It was totally nonverbal. It was just like, but they did it instantly, and they knew it, and they knew exactly what they meant. And they didn't have to talk. And like our kids never do that. I mean, that's in deficits in joint attention are one of the kind of the hallmark signs of autistic disorder. So know what joint attention is. Teaching executive function. There's no particular ways to teach executive function. Executive function is just basically being organized and getting places on time, doing your work on time, paying your bills, getting to class, being able to just organizational skills, basically. Those are called executive functioning skills. You know what those are. Okay, contingencies. Here's the last thing. Almost the last thing. I didn't know what these were, so I probably got the questions wrong when I took the test. These are not on the task list. There's just a term called contingency. So under contingency, I put up 3-term contingency, but also these different classroom activities. So classroom-based. Group-based classroom contingencies. The first one is independent. That's the easiest one. That is where everybody is earning their own reward. So they say, okay, as soon as you're done, as soon as you finish your math worksheet, you can go outside to recess. And when Bobby's done, Bobby goes outside. When Mary's done, Mary goes outside. So they're independent. Everybody's working for their own thing. They all get the same prize, but they can get it as soon as they meet the requirement. Interdependent is everyone has to meet the criteria before anyone gets the reward. And so that's, as soon as everybody finishes their math sheet, we can all go outside. So there's independent, which is every person for himself. Interdependent, everybody's got to meet the goal, meet the requirement. And then there's dependent, which I've never heard of. And dependent is, we all get to go outside when Bobby finishes his math worksheet. Which is like, what? That sounds kind of Lord of the Flies, that's what's going to happen to poor Bobby. But the idea is that you have, and it's called the hero model, and you have the child with a disability or a difficulty in some way be the person that everybody's depending on to get their reinforcer. And then the idea is if you do that, then everybody's going to be super supportive and helpful of Bobby. That's the dependent group contingency. And I certainly see you got to be on top of that because it could certainly go badly for Bobby if you don't do it right. But so no, independent is just what it sounds like. Interdependent is kind of what it sounds like. And dependent is the weird one, and that's dependent equals hero. Remember that. That's just one you're going to have to memorize. I don't have a good mnemonic for that or anything. Let's see. The only kind of new one, the hardest one in there is non-contingent reinforcement. So, and it's probably because the name is wrong. It's a bad name. But in non-contingent reinforcement, we'll talk about that really quick. In non-contingent reinforcement, you get rid of it. It's a reductive procedure. You get rid of the behavior by giving the child what they want, independent of the bad behavior they're doing in order to get it. And that's bad. That's hard to understand.
Sweet.
So let me say. Go ahead.
Is it so you're giving them what they want when they're not doing the behavior that they're doing to get? I probably said it wrong.
Yes, that is it. I mean, technically, you're technically giving it randomly, so you could inadvertently give it when they're doing the bad thing. But you say like, if a child is tantruming in order to get attention from mom, then you say, okay, your mom is going to give the child attention randomly for 2 minutes, 5 times an hour, whether they're tantruming or not.
Oh, okay.
So they could theoretically be tantruming. I would make it say like, well, don't give it to him if he is tantruming,
Yeah,
but that's
like
not technically
different
part of it. By definition,
Okay.
it's not technically part of it. So you figure if the child is doing a bad behavior in order to get a certain reinforcer, then you just give them the reinforcer on a random schedule independent of the bad behavior. That's called non-contingent reinforcement. I don't think they should call it that because it's not really reinforcement. Because it's not actually reinforcing something, it's just
Randomly dispersing it whenever they feel like.
Whether it's behavior.
well, it's not.
Whether there's.
Well, anyway, but don't worry about that. Like me saying it's stupid doesn't help you remember it. So, okay. So, but basically, the idea is that the child's not going to tantrum anymore because they're already getting what they want. And we had a family who had a child who was on a medication that made him really hungry. He wanted to get into the cabinets and get food all the time. His parents didn't want him to, so they put locks on the cabinets. Then he would like find tools in the garage and like break open the cabinets.
Yes.
And so we just said, just give him the food, and he'll stop breaking open. He'll stop destroying your cabinets, and he did. They didn't want to give him the food, but we just said, like, give him the food. Like,
Kind of one of the things that's like pick your battle.
Pick your battle, 100%. Don't die on that hill. Okay, antecedent interventions. Let's talk about that really quick. Antecedent interventions, any intervention that involves manipulating the antecedent. Okay, so and that typically means removing the SD for a behavior. And this is the silliest example that actually worked, but we had a client who had a tantrum every time mom said it's time for the bus. And I said, like, every time? Yeah, if I say it's time for the bus, man, he has a big old tantrum. It's like, well, what if you don't say that? Well, I'll try. Like, he got on the bus just fine. He just, like for 6 months of it, he hated getting on the bus, and just that was what triggered it, and she just stopped doing it, and it went away. I'm sure it came back in some way, but antecedent interventions are sort of like a quickie fix, so that you can teach an alternative behavior to replace it. Behavioral momentum / high P request sequence. So we all know behavioral momentum, right? So it's like touch your nose, wave, clap. Now you do the hard thing. It's like if the child's not doing expressive object labeling, it's like do this, do this, do this. What's your name? That's momentum, and that's also high P request sequence, high probability request sequence. So it's just a name for something that didn't know how to name.
Can you explain that one more time? Sorry.
Yes.
I zoned out.
So you're doing expressive object labeling with a child, and they're not. They can do it, but they're just not giving you the answer. Like, what is it? And remote. And then they're just like, see, do this, do this, do this. What is it? Remote.
Okay.
And then so you were more likely to give a response if you just given a bunch of other responses really quickly in a row right before.
Okay.
So go to high probability behaviors, and then go into the lower probability behavior, and the child will be more responsive. Hold on. Oh, okay. Actually, we're doing good. Response blocking. And response blocking is just physically preventing a child from doing a behavior. So if your client is about to hit the kid next to him, just get your arm in there and don't let him do it. Block the behavior. It's used for self-stimulatory behavior, and I wouldn't think it would work, but I guess it does. We never bother to do it. But you have kids who have very high levels of some repetitive self-stimulatory behavior. You can just block you block the self-stim, and then presumably you need to give them some other way to stim. But here's an example where you want to do that. We've seen kids who stim by poking their fingers in their eyeballs.
Yeah.
And they just and it makes lights and it looks kind of weird. And if you're really bored, it's like, well, it's something. But then the kids, they have to press their finger in further and further, and they get under the eyelid, and kids get eye infections. And so say, okay, you got to stop that. So that's when you would just block. And if you block 100% for 5 days, the kid's going to give up at least when you're around, because I just never get to do it. So that would be response blocking.
Would you give them a replacement card?
Ideally, you would give them a replacement. Yes,
Okay.
you would give them something else to do, so you can stop being there. Because as soon as you're gone, they're going
Oh, you have a kid like that. That's why.
to go. And frequently with response blocking, you do something called redirection. Redirection is just giving an SD to do another behavior. And so and have you ever been with a kid and he's going to hit the kid next to him? So you say, "Where's your paper?" And they're like, and you just move your. Can you move your chair over here? And just and then he doesn't. You know something bad's going to happen. You just quickly redirect to something else. And kid does it. So you frequently use response blocking and redirection together. So you block the thing and then you direct them to do something else. Overcorrection. We don't do this very much, but overcorrection. Do we?
Sometimes.
Okay. So overcorrection has two components usually: restitution and positive practice. So if a child does something, basically overcorrection is for making a mess. So if a child breaks something or makes a mess, they have to clean up. They have to fix the problem. They have to fix whatever they messed up, and then they have to overcorrect. They have to do something more. So if a child dumped his cereal on the floor, say, okay, clean it up, and then you got to mop the whole floor. Or if you litter, if kids outside and he litters, you say, okay, pick it up, and then you have to clean up the whole playground. So restitution, fix exactly what you did, and then positive practice, you have to practice that skill in a repetitive way. What kind of consequence is overcorrection in terms of, is it positive or negative reinforcement or positive or negative punishment?
Well, first, wouldn't it all depend on if it's actually working to decrease the behavior?
It is a reductive procedure, and it works to decrease the behavior.
Okay.
So it is by definition
Just making sure.
punishment.
Yeah.
It is by definition punishment. What kind? Negative or positive?
Positive.
Positive. You're presenting lots of stimuli. You're making them do something. You're making do things you didn't do before. What is response blocking?
When you stop them from doing a certain behavior.
Right, but I'm sorry.
Oh, it's negative, positive, or negative punishment.
Negative or positive reinforcement or punishment? Aaron, talk it through.
Okay, response blocking. So you're preventing them by adding something that's going to decrease the behavior.
That's right.
So
That's it.
punishment, positive punishment?
Positive punishment.
Oh, that's
You don't
awesome.
think of it as being positive punishment, but it is positive punishment. Redirection is positive punishment too. You're lowering a behavior and giving them a stimulus by giving them a stimulus. Behavior intervention plan. Note there's 3 parts. The behavior intervention plan is just the write-up of how we intervene on a behavior. It has 3 parts: a description of the behavior, a like an operational definition usually, a hypothesis about what's causing the behavior, and a strategy to reduce the behavior. So it's sort of a functional behavioral assessment plus a plan. And these are things you just got to review them. It'll be in the Quizlet. It'll just name the 3 parts of it and so on, but know them. This is the last part of A we didn't talk about. They say knowledge of research regarding treatment intensity. You should know that the greater the intensity, the greater the level of benefit the kids get from intensive early intervention. So if kids got 40 hours, do better than kids got 10, do better than kids who got 0. Okay. Knowledge of early intensive therapy, just note, I'm not going to go over that, but just this is all in the thing. Know this basic information. It's not a ton that you need to know. So, but you know these 4 points from the task list. Data collection, this is all pretty straightforward. So measurement dimensions, we measure rate, duration, percentage. Those are all just, you know, high school math. Measurement procedures, event recording. Event recording just means counting. That's the same thing as counting or frequency. I didn't really use that term ever, so it was new to me. Timing means measuring duration, so how long did it last? 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Time sampling, know what partial interval time sampling is, which is the play date data that we take. Know what momentary time sampling is, which we looked at the video there. And whole interval time sampling is just like partial, but you just record a plus if they did the behavior the whole duration of the observation interval, as opposed to just during some part of it. Inter-observer agreement. We don't do it very often. You do it a lot in research because you need to show that you have consistency. But if you want to find out if two people are taking data the same, they're measuring behavior the same, if you want to find out if the trainee is learned to do it right, you have them both measure a behavior, and then you take the low number, divide it by the high number, and multiply it by 100, and that gives you a percentage, and that's the percent agreement. There's a lot of different ways to measure inter-observer agreement, but just know that they're talking about this, and if they ask you to calculate it, it's going to be low divided by high and multiply by 100 to get a percentage. And then for the ethical and legal considerations, review, I just put in a bunch of notes from our like the trainings actually we did this summer. The OSHA stuff and confidentiality, and we talked about. The stuff you do for the abuse training we do. Are you guys doing the CPR training?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so the responding to emergencies, I think I put a question mark here because I wasn't sure what that was, and I realized, oh, that's like basic first aid and CPR and stuff like that. And you're not going to have to like describe all the stuff to do first aid, to do CPR, but just be aware of that. No dual relationships are bad. Hey, we're done.